The air in the briefing tent was thick enough to drink, a humid cocktail of canvas, sweat, and cheap coffee. Outside, the Panamanian jungle hissed and clicked, a living entity that pressed in from all sides. Inside, the only sound was the drone of a generator and the rhythmic clicking of a pen against a clipboard, held in the hand of Major Thorne. He was a man carved from the Marine Corps recruiting posters, jaw square, eyes flint-hard, uniform impossibly crisp despite the oppressive heat. He was looking at the woman sitting opposite him with an expression that hovered between irritation and outright disbelief. Eva Rostova looked back, her own expression placid, unreadable. She was 52, though the harsh sun of 1,000 different hellholes had etched deeper lines into her face. Her hair, once a dark brown, was now a practical, short-cropped steel gray. She wore simple cargo pants and a moisture-wicking shirt, clothes that spoke of function, not affiliation. Scars, pale and silvery, mapped the skin on her forearms, telling stories she never would. To Thorne, she looked like a washed-up hiking guide, not the high-level SEER consultant command had insisted on. "So, Ms. Rostova," Thorne began, his voice dripping with forced cordiality, "your file is sparse." Eva didn't rise to the bait. "It's complete. It says you have extensive experience in hostile environments, a bit vague for our purposes. We're running a deep jungle evasion course for a force recon platoon. These are not Boy Scouts. They are the tip of the spear." He gestured to the 4 Marines standing at ease behind him. They were young, built like predators, their arrogance a tangible force in the small tent. There was Sergeant Reyes, the platoon sergeant, his face a mask of confident authority. Corporal Davies, a thick-necked brawler whose knuckles were permanently scuffed. PFC Chen, younger, wirier, his eyes constantly moving, taking everything in. And PFC Garcia, who stood with the bored stillness of someone who believed they had seen it all. They looked at Eva and saw nothing. A civilian, an old woman, an obstacle. "I'm here to observe your protocols and offer feedback," Eva said, her voice low and even. "That was the mandate." "The mandate?" Thorne scoffed softly, a smirk playing on his lips. "Right. Well, observe from the FOB. We'll have a live feed. You can offer all the feedback you want from the comfort of an air-conditioned tent. My mandate is to be in the field with the unit." Eva corrected him, her tone unchanging. It wasn't a request. It was a statement of fact. Thorne's jaw tightened. The disrespect was galling. He had argued with the colonel about this. Bringing a female civilian of her age, into a live-fire training zone was a risk, a liability. "That's not feasible. The environment is unforgiving. The men move fast. You wouldn't keep up." Behind him, Corporal Davies coughed a laugh into his fist. Reyes shot him a mild glare, but the sentiment was shared. They imagined having to carry her pack, to slow their pace for her. "I'll keep up," Eva said. The finality in her 2 words was absolute, leaving no room for argument. It hung in the soupy air, a quiet challenge that infuriated Thorne more than any shouted demand would have. He saw the amusement in his men's eyes and felt his authority being subtly undermined. He had to reassert control. This woman, this consultant, needed to understand her place. The dismissal began in the briefing tent but festered into open contempt at the gear check. The 4 Marines were laying out their equipment on ponchos, a meticulous display of honed lethality. M4 rifles, suppressors, advanced optics, comms gear, medical kits, and heavy packs laden with everything needed for 72 hours of unsupported operations. Major Thorne walked the line, inspecting every piece with a critical eye. Eva stood to the side, her own pack at her feet. It was a small, unassuming thing barely larger than a day pack. Corporal Davies, emboldened by the major's obvious disdain for the woman, sauntered over. He nudged her pack with the toe of his boot. "Traveling light, ma'am?" he asked, his voice a low drawl loud enough for everyone to hear. "Hope you brought enough lipstick for 3 days in the bush." PFC Garcia snickered. Reyes said nothing, his silence a form of consent. Chun looked down, a flicker of discomfort on his face, but he didn't dare speak up. Eva didn't even look at Davies. Her gaze was fixed on the jungle's edge, as if listening to a conversation no one else could hear. Her stillness was a rock against which their mockery broke and dissipated. It made Davies angry. He was used to reactions. Fear, anger, indignation. He got nothing. Seriously, he pressed, squatting down to poke at her pack. What you got in here? Trail mix and a copy of Eat, Pray, Love? Thorn watched from a distance, a thin smile on his face. He wouldn't intervene. His men needed to see that this consultant was out of her depth. It would strengthen their confidence in him, in their own abilities. Let them have their fun. Davies stood up, flexing his powerful shoulders. He was an expert in hand-to-hand combat, the platoon's go-to instructor for close-quarters fighting. You know, ma'am, it can get dangerous out there. You get separated, you need to know how to handle yourself. He moved toward a training dummy set up nearby. Let me show you a simple compliance hold. Something to slow an enemy down. He grabbed the dummy, twisted its arm behind its back, and slammed it to the ground in a single, fluid motion. It was an act of gratuitous, theatrical violence. He turned back to Eva, his eyes gleaming. See? Simple. Let me show you on a person so you can feel the leverage points. Before Eva could refuse, he stepped forward and grabbed her left arm, his grip like a steel clamp. Don't worry. I'll be gentle. This was the assault, not of malice, but of pure, condescending arrogance. He was going to put her in her place, treat her like a child, and humiliate her in front of the unit. The world seemed to slow down. Eva didn't tense up. She didn't try to pull away. She yielded. As Davies began to apply pressure and twist, she moved with him, a subtle, almost imperceptible shift of her entire body. She flowed with his momentum, her center of gravity dropping. Her right hand, moving no faster than if she were brushing lint from a sleeve, came up and found the pressure point on the inside of his wrist, just below the thumb. Her fingers pressed, not hard, but with an anatomically perfect precision that sent a bolt of pure, white-hot agony shooting up Davies's arm. His grip vanished. A strangled gasp escaped his lips. His arm went numb, his fingers tingling as if struck by lightning. He tried to pull back, but Eva's other hand was now at his elbow, guiding his own momentum downward. His knee hit the muddy ground with a wet thud. He was on one knee before her, his head bowed in a posture of complete submission, his face a mask of shock and pain. The entire exchange had taken less than 2 seconds. There was a stunned silence. Garcia's smirk was gone. Reyes's eyes were wide. Thorn's face had hardened into a block of granite. Eva released him. She stepped back, her expression unchanged. The elbow is a hinge, Corporal, she said, her voice as calm as a frozen lake. Not a ball joint. If you forget that, you give your opponent the key to every lock in your body. Davies scrambled to his feet, shame and fury warring on his face. He cradled his wrist, his bravado shattered. Thorn strode over, his boots crunching on the gravel. His anger was not directed at Davies for his insubordination, but at Eva for her competence. She had disrupted his neat hierarchy. She had embarrassed one of his men. She had challenged him. Ms. Rostova, he said, his voice dangerously low. That was unnecessary. We are a team here. Your actions are detrimental to unit cohesion. You are an observer. That is all. Do not interfere with my men again. Is that understood? Understood, Major, Eva replied, meeting his glare without flinching. The dismissal was no longer veiled in sarcasm. It was a direct order, a line drawn in the mud. She was an outsider, a problem to be managed, and he had just made it clear that her expertise, whatever it might be, was not welcome here. The UH-60 Black Hawk beat the air into submission, its rotors washing the jungle canopy in a turbulent vortex. Inside, the 5 Marines and Eva sat in stony silence, the roar of the engines a convenient excuse for the palpable tension. They were being inserted 20 clicks deep into the Darien Gap, a stretch of jungle so dense and unforgiving it was known as the Green Hell. Their objective was to navigate to a pre-assigned extraction point 72 hours later, all while evading a hunter-killer team of OPFOR soldiers. For the Marines, it was the ultimate test. For Eva, it was just another Tuesday. They fast-roped down into a small, humid clearing, the helicopter peeling away with a final, deafening roar, leaving them in a world of suffocating green. The silence that descended was immediate and profound, broken only by the chittering of insects and the drip of water from broad leaves. Sergeant Reyes took point, his M4 held at a low ready. "All right, let's move. We've got a ridgeline 2 clicks north. Good place to lay low and get our bearings." He consulted the GPS on his wrist, a piece of tech that gave him a dangerous sense of certainty. He set a hard pace, pushing through the thick undergrowth with the brute force of a young man who believed willpower could conquer any terrain. Eva followed at the rear, her pace steady and economical, her eyes scanning not a screen, but the world around her. The broken twigs on the path, the direction of the wind, the subtle changes in the chorus of jungle sounds. The crisis did not arrive like a thunderclap. It seeped in, a gradual accumulation of small, cascading failures. The first sign was the comms. Reyes tried to make his scheduled check-in with the FOB. Nothing. Just a hiss of static. "Atmospheric interference," he grunted, annoyed but not yet worried. "Common out here." Eva knew better. She had felt the barometric pressure drop. The air had grown heavy, expectant. The sky, visible only in small patches through the canopy, was turning a bruised purple. A storm was coming, a tropical monster that would laugh at their radio signals. Then came PFC Chen's injury. They were navigating a steep, muddy slope when his foot slipped on a moss-slicked root. His ankle turned with a sickening pop, and he went down with a sharp cry of pain, his rifle clattering against the rocks. The platoon halted. Reyes and Garcia helped him up, but he couldn't put any weight on his left foot. His ankle was already swelling to the size of a grapefruit. "I can walk," Chen insisted through gritted teeth, his face pale. Reyes swore under his breath. Casualty. On the first day. This would slow them down, make them an easy target for the OPFOR team. Garcia, help him. "We need to find a place to hole up until this passes." His confidence was beginning to fray at the edges. The jungle wasn't cooperating. They limped onward, their pace now agonizingly slow. The storm broke with biblical fury. Rain came down not in drops, but in solid, impenetrable sheets, turning the ground into a treacherous river of mud. Visibility dropped to near zero. The temperature plummeted. Within minutes, the highly trained Marines were soaked, shivering, and miserable. Reyes's GPS was now useless. Its screen fogged over, its signal lost beneath the storm's electromagnetic rage. They were blind. It was then that they heard the sound. It wasn't the clean, distinct pop of the training rounds their OPFOR was supposed to be using. It was the guttural, menacing chatter of an AK-47, followed by a longer burst from a different weapon. The sounds were terrifyingly close, carried on the wind and rain. "What the hell was that?" Davies hissed, crouching low, his bravado forgotten and replaced by primal fear. "OPFOR must have gotten their hands on some live ammo to scare us," Reyes said, but his voice lacked conviction. He knew, they all knew, that was a breach of protocol so severe it was unthinkable. Eva stood perfectly still, her head cocked, listening. She ignored the rain plastering her hair to her scalp. She filtered out the noise of the storm and focused on that alien, man-made sound. There were voices, too. Shouted commands in Spanish, harsh and guttural. "Those aren't Marines," she said, her voice cutting through their rising panic. "And this is no longer a training exercise." The realization landed like a physical blow. Their meticulously planned exercise had gone horribly, irrevocably wrong. They had blundered into someone else's territory. Cartel, maybe. FARC remnants. It didn't matter. They were lost, with an injured man, cut off from support, and being hunted by men who weren't firing blanks. The green hell had grown teeth, and they were trapped in its jaws. Sergeant Reyes looked at the impenetrable wall of jungle around them, then at his injured Marine, then at the useless GPS on his wrist. For the first time in his decorated career, He was completely and utterly out of his depth. The tip of the spear was broken. Panic was a cold fungus, spreading through the platoon in the damp air. Garcia fumbled with his radio, trying to raise the FOB, his movements jerky and inefficient. Davies scanned the trees, his knuckles white on the grip of his rifle, seeing enemies in every shadow. Reyes, the leader, was frozen, his mind cycling through useless training protocols that had no answer for this kind of reality. They were loud. They were scared. They were prey. Eva moved. There was no discussion, no request for command. She simply took it. Her first action was to silence them. She placed a hand on Garcia's shoulder, a firm, steady pressure that made him stop fiddling with the radio. "They'll hear that," she whispered, the sound barely audible above the rain. Her voice wasn't panicked. It was calm, factual, and that quiet authority cut through their fear more effectively than any shout. She turned to Reyes. "Your ridgeline strategy is out. It's the first place they'll look. High ground is a death sentence when you're being hunted." She pointed into the swampy, forbidding lowlands they had been trying to avoid. "We go there, into the water. It hides our scent and our tracks." Reyes looked from the relative safety of the hill to the snake-infested morass below. Every instinct screamed at him to stay high, but his instincts had led them here to this disaster. He looked at Eva's eyes. They were clear, focused, utterly devoid of fear. He gave a short, jerky nod. Eva knelt beside Chin. "Let me see the ankle." Her hands were gentle but firm as she assessed the damage. The swelling was severe. "It's a bad sprain, maybe a fracture." She unstrapped the small pack they had mocked. From it, she produced not lipstick, but a tightly rolled Sam splint, compression bandages, and a small vial of painkillers. Her movements were economical, practiced. She supported his leg, applied the splint, and wrapped it with a professional speed that would have made a combat medic proud. She found 2 sturdy branches and, using paracord, fashioned a pair of crude but effective crutches. The entire process took less than 5 minutes. "Now, camouflage," she ordered, scooping a handful of black mud from the ground. She smeared it across her own face in a pattern designed to break up the human outline, then gestured for the others to do the same. They obeyed without question, their previous arrogance replaced by a desperate, childlike compliance. She took point, leading them down into the swamp. The water was cold and murky, rising to their waists. The smell of decay was overpowering, but Eva moved through it with a purpose that belied the hellish conditions. She taught them to step, not splash, to use the thick mangrove roots for cover, to breathe slowly and quietly through their mouths. The powerful Marines, accustomed to dominating their environment, were now clumsy students, struggling to emulate the silent grace of the older woman in front of them. She was part of the jungle and they were just intruders. Hours passed. The storm subsided, replaced by a tense, dripping twilight. They found a small island of semi-dry land, a patch of earth screened by a curtain of hanging vines. Eva called a halt. They were exhausted, cold, and hungry. Davies started to pull out a ration pack, the crinkling of the plastic wrapper sounding like a gunshot in the silence. Eva's hand shot out and stopped him. "No, the smell carries. And no fire." Instead, she pointed to a type of palm tree. "The heart of that is edible. And the grubs in that fallen log," she added, pointing to a rotting tree, "are pure protein." The Marines looked at her, disgusted. She simply took out her knife, sliced a piece of the palm heart for herself, and began to chew. After a moment's hesitation, Chan, the injured one, followed her lead. Then the others. The cartel patrol found them an hour after sunset. The Marines didn't see them coming. Eva heard them. She was listening to the rhythm of the swamp, the frogs, the insects, the night birds, and she heard the discord. A single, misplaced snap of a twig. Cough quickly suppressed. She held up a hand, and the platoon froze. Through the vines, they could see them. 7 men moving in a loose formation, armed with AKs and machetes. They were sweeping the area, their flashlights cutting uselessly through the thick fog rising from the water. They were professionals, but they were in Eva's world now. Reyes instinctively raised his rifle, clicking the safety off. The others followed suit. Their plan was simple: a violent, overwhelming ambush. Firefight. No, Eva whispered, her voice a razor. You fire one shot, and every one of them in this jungle will know where we are. There are more than 7-inch. What do we do? Reyes breathed, his training offering no alternative. Eva looked at the 7 men, now less than 50 meters away. She looked at the 4 terrified Marines. She made a calculation. Then she turned to Davies, the big, strong brawler who had challenged her. Give me your knife, she said. Davies stared at her, confused. It was a K-bar, a 7-inch blade of black steel, a Marine's symbol of strength. He hesitated, then handed it to her, hilt first. Eva took the knife. Its weight felt familiar in her hand. She gave them one last look. Stay here. Don't move. Don't make a sound. No matter what you hear. And then she was gone. She didn't run or crawl. She simply melted into the swamp, disappearing into the shadows between one heartbeat and the next. The 4 Marines were left alone in the darkness, clutching their rifles, their eyes straining to see something, anything. What followed was not a battle. It was a harvest. The narration of the next 10 minutes was written in sound and absence. The Marines heard a soft splash to their left, so quiet it could have been a fish. One of the 7 flashlight beams, which had been methodically sweeping the trees, abruptly went out. There was no shout, no scream, just absence. The other 6 men paused, calling out a name in low Spanish. A few moments later, another sound, the gentle rustle of leaves high in the canopy above them. Another flashlight beam, this one pointed upwards, jerked violently and then extinguished. A soft, heavy thud followed, a sound absorbed by the damp earth. Now there were 5. They were getting nervous, clustering together, their weapons pointed out into the oppressive darkness. They started speaking in rapid, panicked whispers. Eva used their fear against them. A thrown rock created a diversion to their right. As they swung their weapons toward the sound, she emerged from the water behind them, sleek and silent as an otter. The Marines saw a brief, fleeting silhouette against the fog. A flash of movement. The man at the back of the group went down, a gurgle his only epitaph. For left. The remaining men panicked. They opened fire, spraying blindly into the jungle, their muzzle flashes illuminating a world of terrifying green and shadow. The roar of their weapons was an act of desperation, a tantrum against a ghost. The Marines flattened themselves to the ground, the bullets zipping high over their heads. The firing stopped. In the ringing silence that followed, a new sound emerged. A low, haunting whistle, like the sound of wind through a cracked bone. It seemed to come from everywhere at once. It was an old psychological trick, designed to unnerve and disorient. The remaining cartel soldiers were now completely terrified, firing at shadows, shouting at each other. They were no longer a team. They were just 3 scared men waiting to die. One of them broke and ran, splashing wildly back the way he came. He didn't get 10 feet before something pulled him down into the murky water. There was a brief, frantic struggle, and then stillness. The water rippled. The last 2 stood back to back, spinning in circles, their rifles pointed at a jungle that had become their tomb. They didn't see Eva drop from the branch above. One moment they were standing, the next they were gone. The silence that returned was absolute, deeper and more complete than before. A minute later, a figure emerged from the shadows and stepped back onto their small island. It was Eva. Her face was still camouflaged with mud. She was not breathing heavily. She was not wounded. In her hand, she held Davies's K-bar. She wiped the blade clean on a handful of leaves, the motion precise and methodical, before holding it out to him. The 4 Marines stared at her. They looked from her calm face to the now silent jungle around them. 7 men, armed, neutralized without a single shot from their side. They hadn't witnessed a fight. They had witnessed an extermination, carried out by a predator far more dangerous than anything they had ever imagined. The woman they had dismissed as a den mother, an old hiker, was something else entirely. And for the first time, they felt a cold, primal fear that had nothing to do with the jungle. The swamp was quiet again, reclaiming the brief, violent intrusion of men. The four Marines sat in stunned silence, the adrenaline draining away, leaving a hollow feeling of awe and terror. They looked at Eva, who was calmly checking the perimeter of their small island, her movements as fluid and natural as a jaguar's. The image of her disappearing into the night and the subsequent, systematic dismantling of the patrol was seared into their minds. It defied every tactical scenario they had ever trained for. Sergeant Reyes finally found his voice. It was hoarse, barely a whisper. Who are you?" Eva paused, her back to them. She didn't turn around. "Someone who knows this kind of jungle." Her answer was a deflection, offering them nothing. It only deepened the mystery. As if on cue, the field radio, which had been silent for hours, crackled to life. A distorted voice, broken by static, cut through the night. "Bravo 6, repeat. This is command. Do you copy?" The storm had passed, and a weak signal was punching through. Reyes scrambled for the handset, his hands shaking slightly. Before he could key the mic, Eva was there, taking it from him. She had produced a small, foldable antenna from her pack, which she quickly attached, clarifying the signal instantly. She had been waiting for the right moment. She had known the atmospheric window would open. "Command, this is an unidentified element accompanying Bravo 6. We copy," Eva said, her voice calm and professional. Major Thorne's voice blasted from the speaker, tight with fury and a day's worth of anxiety. "Who the hell is this?" "This is Major Thorne. Put Sergeant Reyes on the line, now." The Marines flinched at the anger in his tone. Reyes reached for the handset, but Eva held up a hand, stopping him. "Major, this is Rostova," she said, her tone level. "Sergeant Reyes is here. The platoon is secure. We have one non-life-threatening injury, PFC chin, suspected ankle fracture. We evaded the training OPFOR and made contact with a hostile element of 7 armed individuals. The threat has been neutralized. We require immediate extraction." There was a moment of stunned silence on the other end. Then Thorne's voice returned, practically sputtering with rage. "Neutralized? You are a civilian observer, Ms. Rostova. You had absolutely no authority to engage. You have jeopardized this entire operation. You will be facing a full inquiry for this, I guarantee." Suddenly, Thorne's transmission was cut off. A new voice came over the channel, crisp, clear, and imbued with an authority that made Thorne's anger sound like a child's tantrum. "Major Thorne, shut your mouth. Right now." The silence that followed was absolute. The voice belonged to someone far up the chain of command. "This is General Maddox at SOCOM. We've been monitoring this situation since your team went dark. Now, put the person you're speaking to back on." Eva keyed the mic, "General." A wave of relief washed through the general's voice, a warmth that was entirely at odds with the ice he had shown Thorne. "Eva? By God, is that you? It's John Maddox." Eva allowed a hint of softness into her own voice. "John, it's been a long time." "Too long," Maddox replied. "I saw your name on the consultant roster. Didn't realize they'd thrown you into the green hell with a recon platoon on your first day out. Thorne's report said you were an observer." "I was observing," Eva confirmed dryly. "And you neutralized a threat? 7 hostiles?" Maddox asked, a note of what sounded like fond familiarity in his voice. "Affirmative, John. They were professionals. Cartel by the look of their gear. They were closing in. We had no other option." "I see," Maddox said. The Marines in the clearing could almost hear him nodding. He trusted her assessment without question. Then, his voice turned back to steel as he addressed the major, who was undoubtedly listening in on the channel, mortified. "Major Thorne," General Maddox said, his voice now dangerously quiet. "The woman on that radio is retired Navy Commander Eva Rostova. For 25 years, she was the team leader for Echo Squadron. If you don't know who they are, it's because you're not cleared to. The name she operated under was Banshee. The name hung in the air, an explosion of understanding. Banshee, it wasn't just a call sign. It was a ghost story, a legend whispered about at BUD/S, and in the chow halls of Spec Ops bases around the world. The ghost operator who could infiltrate any location, eliminate any target, and vanish without a trace. A name associated with the most dangerous and clandestine missions of the last 2 decades. The Marines stared at Eva, their minds struggling to reconcile the quiet, middle-aged woman with the mythical, terrifying figure of Banshee, the silent movement, the impossible efficiency, the way she had commanded the jungle itself. It all clicked into place with horrifying clarity. Commander Rostova, Maddox continued, his voice leaving no room for misunderstanding, has more successful combat operations in jungle environments than your entire battalion combined. She wrote the book on unconventional warfare that you probably skimmed in officer training. From this moment on, you are to consider every word she says as a direct order from me. You will extend her every possible courtesy and render any and all aid she requires. Am I making myself absolutely, crystal clear, Major? The only sound from the radio was the faint hiss of static. Thorne was too humiliated, too utterly defeated, to even reply. I'll take your silence as a yes, Maddox finished. Eva, get those boys home. Chopper is en route to your location. Copy that, John, Eva said. She clicked off the radio and handed it back to a dumbstruck Reyes. The reveal was complete. The ghost was real, and she had just saved their lives. The return to the FOB was a study in contrasts. The flight in had been loud with arrogance and tension. The flight back was shrouded in a heavy, reverent silence. The Marines didn't look at each other. They looked at Eva. They replayed every interaction, every dismissive comment, every condescending smirk, and cringed at their own foolishness. They had been children mocking a god of war. Davies sat furthest away, staring at the floor of the helicopter, the handle of his K-bar, which Eva had returned to him without a word, clutched in his hand. As the Black Hawk descended, the lights of the base illuminated a figure standing alone on the landing pad. It was Major Thorne. He stood ramrod straight, his face pale and grim under the floodlights. The helicopter touched down and the side door slid open. The Marines filed out, PFC Chin leaning on Garcia. Eva was the last one to disembark. She landed softly on the tarmac, her small pack slung over one shoulder, and faced the Major. Thorne marched forward and came to a halt 3 feet in front of her. The entire base, it seemed, was watching. Medics, mechanics, other soldiers, they all paused to see the confrontation. Thorne's career was likely in jeopardy, his authority shattered. He had a choice: double down on his pride or accept his humiliation. He chose the latter. His body went rigid. His arm snapped up in a salute so sharp, so precise, it seemed to cut the humid night air. It was the salute of a subordinate to a superior officer, a formal, public acknowledgement of her rank, her experience, and her victory. It was a complete and unconditional surrender. Eva, as a civilian, did not return the salute. She simply stood there for a beat, letting the gesture hang in the air for all to see. Then she gave him a short, almost imperceptible nod. It was not forgiveness. It was dismissal. She had been right, he had been wrong, and nothing more needed to be said. She walked past him without another glance. As she headed toward the temporary quarters assigned to her, Corporal Davies intercepted her. He blocked her path, his massive frame seeming smaller than it had a day ago. He couldn't meet her eyes. His gaze was fixed on the ground in front of her boots. He held out his K-bar. "Ma'am," he mumbled, his voice thick with shame. You should have this. I'm not worthy of it." He was offering her his weapon, the symbol of his identity as a Marine, as a warrior. It was the only apology he knew how to make. Eva looked down at the knife in his trembling hand, then up at his face. She saw not the arrogant bully from the day before, but a humbled, broken young man. She didn't take the knife. "It's a tool, Corporal," she said, her voice quiet but firm. It doesn't have worth. The person who wields it does. Keep it, and learn how to truly use it. She stepped around him and continued walking, leaving him standing there, stunned, the heavy knife feeling both like a burden and a second chance in his hand. Reyes and the others watched her go, their faces a mixture of awe and fear. They had been in the presence of a legend and had been too blind to see it. The mockery was gone, replaced by a respect so profound it was almost a physical force. Later that night, the jungle resumed its ceaseless symphony. The sounds of the bass, the generators, the distant shouts, the clank of metal, were a flimsy barrier against the immense, living darkness that surrounded them. Eva sat alone on a wooden crate outside her corrugated tin barracks, a small cleaning kit open beside her. A single, bare bulb overhead cast a pool of yellow light, throwing her weathered face into sharp relief. She was methodically disassembling, cleaning, and reassembling her sidearm, a well-worn Sig Sauer P226. Her movements were a ritual, a form of meditation honed over decades in 100 similar transient lodgings. Each part was wiped down, oiled, and inspected with an intimate focus. This was her church, these were her sacraments, the maintenance of the tools that kept her, and others, alive. A hesitant shuffling sound made her pause, though she didn't look up. PFC Chun stood there, leaning heavily on the improvised crutches she had made for him, his injured foot, now properly bandaged by the medics, elevated off the ground. He stood just at the edge of the light, as if hesitant to intrude on her solitude. He cleared his throat. "Ma'am." Eva slid the pistol's frame back onto the rails with a soft, metallic click. "PFC," she acknowledged, her eyes still on her work. I wanted to say thank you," Chin said, his voice earnest. "For the ankle. And for everything." "You did well today, Chen," Eva said, picking up a magazine and testing the spring. "You didn't panic when you were injured. You kept moving. That's a harder thing to do than pulling a trigger." The unexpected praise seemed to startle the young Marine. "Thank you, ma'am," he lingered for a moment, wanting to ask more, to understand the universe that had just been opened up to him. He wanted to ask about Banshee, about the legends, about the things she had seen and done. But looking at her, at the quiet, self-contained stillness she projected, he understood that those were questions you never asked. "Get some rest," Eva said, finally looking up at him. Her eyes, in the harsh light, seemed ancient. "Heal up, and the next time you're out there, learn to listen to the jungle. It tells you everything you need to know long before your eyes do." Chun nodded slowly, understanding that her advice was about more than just auditory perception. It was about awareness, about seeing the world as it truly was, not as you expected it to be. "Yes, ma'am. Good night, ma'am." He turned and hobbled away into the darkness. Eva watched him go, then returned to her task. She finished with the pistol and moved on to meticulously repacking her small, efficient bag. Each item had its place, each fold and strap was secured with purpose. When she was done, she sat for a long time, her hands resting on her knees, perfectly still. She wasn't looking at the base or the men around her. Her gaze was fixed on the impenetrable wall of the jungle, the great, dark canopy silhouetted against a sky full of unfamiliar stars. The green hell. To others, it was an enemy. To her, it was a sanctuary, a place of terrible, honest clarity. A quiet sentinel, at peace in the heart of the very danger she commanded. She watched the moon rise, waiting for the dawn.